Talk Show. Recorded live.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Myth or Logic Radio. My name is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com, and I am so pleased to have with me today David Wilcock, and David's been on our show several times. I've lost count. But David is a professional lecturer, filmmaker, and researcher of ancient civilizations, consciousness, science, and new paradigms of matter and energy. His upcoming Hollywood film, Convergence, unveils the proof that all life on Earth is united in the field of consciousness, which affects our minds in fascinating ways. And David, welcome to the show. I understand your book is going to be coming out soon, so whatever you want to talk about, just jump right in.
Okay, well, yeah, I am. That's nice and easy, you know. It's not like we have a lot of demands here, but that's good because, as you know, I can generate my own content quite nicely. No, there's very fascinating stuff going on right now, and I've been writing a 3-part article series called China's October Surprise. And doing a live format like this and having you be able to respond to me may be a good way to sort of summarize what I've been saying in this 3-part article series, because honestly, right now, this is the biggest story on the planet. There's really nothing else that's ever happened like this in the entire history of UFOs and what we've been looking at. And it's because the rules have changed, and I wrote about this. So a bit of an overview before we get into that. I am in contact with, I don't know, I estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 different guys who have classification. Actually, one of them is female. Most of them are not, but one of them is female. But different people who have classification that can be, on a need-to-know basis, significantly higher than the President of the United States or most other world leaders, for that matter. And that's actually not uncommon. The thing that people don't realize is they say that, why won't the government tell us that UFOs exist? Well, the government doesn't know. A lot of times the elected leaders, like in the case of the Clinton administration, pushed really hard to try to get information, and even had the director of the CIA push to get information, and they couldn't get in. The last time that we really had the president fully briefed on what was going on was Eisenhower. And you remember that he made that speech where he was warning about the military-industrial complex. Right. He told Kennedy, look, you know, they're closing this whole thing down. They're privatizing. It's going to become corporate. It's not going to be under the control of the government anymore. Watch out. And then when Kennedy tried to, you know, strike at the heart of the beast, he was struck down. And right. More and more of the research is coming out. We realize that, for example, Kennedy was trying to pass Executive Order 11-110, and that order would have effectively disbarred the Federal Reserve and put us onto U.S. Treasury notes, where we don't have a group of private bankers in Europe who are basically, as we now know, handing out $13 trillion of equity against the American people to predominantly foreign entities, corporations that aren't even here, like Deutsche Bank. And the fact that the Federal Reserve has been forced to make those disclosures at all is one of the really, really incredible shifts that's happening right now, because we are seeing all of the things that people have been talking about, whether they're insiders or whether they're psychics, but all the prophecies are finally coming true after all this time. We're seeing incredible, bold, blatant moves towards disclosure going on. And I count this television show, The Event, as probably the most significant television show that's ever aired. If you consider that the UFO cover-up is the most significant issue in human history, and then you watch a show like The Event where you have President Elias Martinez, obviously Obama, and then I think it was actually on your show, Tom. It was. In fact, I remember now. It was on your show. and a couple others, but I definitely remember doing it with you, where I talked to you last year about the fact that there was a plan for Obama to make a formal announcement to the American people that ETs are real and to actually introduce us to some of them. In fact, 5 different groups, and that we were going to be blown away by how human they looked, that they don't look like scary creatures or insects or anything like that. And this announcement was scheduled for, as we now know, it's no longer secret, it was scheduled for November 27th. I believe that's the date. I tried to block the date out because everybody was saying, when is it going to be? When is it going to be? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I actually leak this date, then there's no way it's going to happen. Because whoever is going to try to stop Obama from doing this is going to be successful because they're going to know what to plan around.
Right.
But nonetheless, one of the things that these insiders have told me, first of all, let's go back a minute and talk about the national security state and what's happened here. Most of everything that's involving UFOs is privatized. It's not part of the elected government, so it's not a government cover-up anymore. And the government, if you want to call it that, the elected government, they're terrified of coming out with this information because these privatized companies have what Dr. Stephen Greer refers to as murder incorporated, meaning that if you get too close to this, they're going to come after you and they're going to try to kill you, or at least threaten you severely. And I was told and I've said this before, so I'm not saying anything that's going to get me in trouble because I already put it out there. I didn't get in trouble. But when Obama was actually first elected, and then he was given this briefing on what it means to be president, he was very strongly and shockingly threatened that, okay, here's how it really works. You do what we tell you to do, or else you're not going to be here, and we're going to put in somebody who will do the job for us. And that kind of threat is palpable, and apparently Obama had no idea that that's what was going on. He really was naive in some ways and didn't understand what the job of president really involves, and the fact that there are these people who basically look way beyond the scope of a 4-year presidential term, and their goal is to try to maintain consistency. And so it's like a ping pong game where you got Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. People get pissed off at the Democrats, they vote Republican. People get pissed off at the Republicans, they vote Democrat. And you got this ridiculous 2-party system.
Right,
where
it's always the same, 2 sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah, and they both have ideological differences that when you combine them, the combination is a lot closer to what these insiders want the world to think. They have some of the ideology of Republicans, that the tendency towards wanting to solve conflict with war, I would say, is much more of a Republican thing. The desire for self-sufficiency, the loathing of the welfare state, that's all very Republican stuff. Republican sentiment tends to be more of a country sentiment. It's more, you're out there in the woods, you got to take care of yourself, you got to be self-sufficient. You don't like the idea of somebody living off of the government. You're much more apt to have a gun because there might be animals you have to defend yourself against, so gun rights are very important. But then there's also the other component that comes with people out in the country that these guys don't like, which is they don't like Christianity. They don't like the idea of people buying into fundamentalism and the whole notion of it's my way or the highway, when in fact their own religion is basically the same thing. They also feel like their faith is essentially the best one out there. So what you're seeing is with the Democrat side, they basically want to try to mold society into people who are like Republicans, meaning violent, tendency towards violence, the self-sufficiency, the wanting everybody to be a warrior, to be like a soldier. But they want the Democrat angle, which is more liberal in terms of hey, I'm not going to be confined to a particular religious belief. I'm not going to be confined to a particular philosophical belief. Let gays be gay, whatever. And that's all. So it's part of this Hegelian dialectic that they're doing, where they're trying to create synthesis from two opposites. And that's what this whole two-party system has been trying to lead us towards. But in fact, even though they've done things like they've showed you George W. Bush or George Sr. with Clinton, and they do these kind of grandiose things to try to get you to synthesize the two things, what's happened is that actually people really do buy into the two-party system. And liberals stay liberal and conservatives stay conservative, and it hasn't worked like they thought it would. But anyway, this is much more of a mundane discussion. The deeper level of what we're talking about here is social engineering, and it's the fact that these guys, it depends on which level of the UFO cover-up you look at in terms of how long they've known. And it's only more recently that I've discovered that there are groups here on the planet that have known about the fact that ETs exist all along. I mean, we're talking over 10, 11,000 years, because, in fact, there are humans who look like us, but who were very significantly more advanced in terms of their level of evolution, including the ability to do all sorts of psychic feats that we would think impossible. And these people have visited the Earth many, many times. They did assist in building the pyramids. Again, they're not scary creatures. They're people like us. You hear about them in many, many different ancient mythological traditions. In fact, when I did all this work for the History Channel to prepare for these Ancient Aliens episodes that I'm featured in, and there are others that I probably will be featured in that haven't aired yet, but I can't be specific, I had to do all kinds of interesting new research and found out a wealth of information. And it's just like every single time you go and look into one of these ancient mythologies, you find that these are human-like people that can levitate and they have glow around them. And you look in the Bible, and it turns out that there are some mistakes in the Bible that need to be fixed in terms of translation. And I talked about this once before, but one of them is the use of the word God is actually often been misconstrued, because in the Old Testament in particular, they use the word Elohim, which actually means mighty ones. And so if you go to any... Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's gods, and there's God, and there's Lord, and Elohim, and I mean, there's all sorts of names, and you really have to wonder, are they talking about one particular God, or a group of humans that could do amazing things that were like gods?
Absolutely. The other thing that I find really astonishing is, and this was research that came up when I was working for the Ancient Aliens show, if you go to any other text from the timeline of when the New Testament and the Old Testament were written, any other text, and you translate the word that we now call heaven in the Bible, any other text from that time period, scholars will unilaterally translate it as either being outer space or the universe. And so this whole idea of God in heaven becomes mighty ones from outer space. And it changes the meaning of so many different things. And unfortunately, one of the things that's happened is that any time that these words show up where God would be plural, they just make it singular. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. And I went through, Norse mythology and found some really stunning stuff. All of these traditions about, like Thor's hammer, for example, which that episode already aired on Ancient Aliens, where they're talking about a clear example of, they call it a hammer, but this is definitely some sort of energetic weapon that this guy has got. And there's many examples of this. You go through